When a doctor prescribes you medication to take, you know it's important for you to do so. But what if those meds are not what you expected them to be? On today's episode of the Exercises Health Podcast, we sit down with Dr. Jody Stanislaw to discuss this idea of the importance of taking your meds. And guess what? Meds is not what you think it is. We're going to cue the intro song, and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health Podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, exercisers? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know about a new training that's happening this week titled How to Rebuild Your Aching Body in as Little as 6 weeks Without Changing Your Lifestyle. See, if you love the discussions that we have every single week on the Exercises Health Podcast, but you want more of the practical application, the details of how to take the information and apply it to your workouts, then you need to be on this training. All you have to do to get registered for free is go to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. But space is limited, so make sure to get registered ASAP. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health Podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, today we have an amazing conversation lined up for you, but before we get into that, we do want to say thank you to every single one of you exercisers who've taken the time to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It helps people find our show and helps our message spread further. And so because of that, we want to take a second right now to highlight a review that we recently received.
This review says, Charlie and Julie know their stuff when it comes to appropriate exercise for the individual. This isn't what you'll find in the mainstream media coverage of health and fitness. Take a listen and learn something new. Thank you so much for that 5-star review. We absolutely thrive on hearing from you guys, our community of exercisers. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to go to your podcasting app, scroll to the bottom, and leave us that 5-star rating and review. And you never know, you might hear your review on the podcast next week.
Hey, Julie, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you ever been prescribed medication from a doctor?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. And have you taken that medication?
Of course.
Yeah, for sure. Like when we think of medication that's been prescribed to us from a doctor, there's usually a certain importance or significance that comes with taking it. Like there's a strong reason why, right? But what if the meds that were being prescribed aren't necessarily what we think they are, meaning they're not necessarily pharmaceuticals, but they're something else. Now, on today's episode of the Exercises Health Podcast, our guest is going to be explaining what she means by this idea of meds. And guess what? She has a really neat acronym that she's come up with that comes out to be meds, and explaining the meaning behind this acronym and why every aspect of it is important for your overall health and well-being. So today's guest is none other than Dr. Jody Stanislaw. Now, Dr. Jody received her doctorate in naturopathic medicine in 2007, and her TEDx talk, Sugar is Not a Treat, has over 2.8 million views. She has successfully managed living with type 1 diabetes since the age of 7, even while often traveling around the globe, and she now shares her wisdom of helping T1Ds all over the world. Well, Dr. Jody, thank you so much for being on our show. I really appreciate your time being with us today.
I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. All right. So one thing that you brought up is this idea of the importance of your meds. Now, when we talk about like meds and medicine, we're normally thinking pharmaceuticals, something along those lines. But for you, meds is a very specific acronym. So yeah. What does meds stand for? And then I want to kind of break down each of those parts.
Sure. These 4 meds are actually the most important meds that every single person around the world needs to take on a daily basis. And they have nothing to do with pharmaceuticals.
All right. I love it.
It's just a fun acronym that happens to work. M is all about mindset. Mindset, your mood. Do you meditate? Like, where is your mind? Right? That is Dr. Bruce Lipton. He wrote The Biology of Belief. He said that your mindset is more powerful in determining your health than any of the other obvious things that we think about. So it's a powerful thing for sure. E is exercise, obviously. D is diet, and S is sleep. Perfect. You know, these it's powerful. Those are all powerful medicines.
They really are. And I love that it fits so nicely with such an easy to remember acronym, right?
It does,
like when we're thinking, yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. All right. So let's dive into each of those aspects. So you have M is mindset. So you referenced Bruce Lipton, but can we explore that a little bit more? Like, really, where does mindset come into play, with our overall health?
It's so powerful. So Bruce Lipton, he did a bunch of science experiments on looking at cellular behavior, and he would take a cell line from the exact same genetics of a cell and put these exact same cells in different petri dishes. But then he would change the environment around each cell. So the exact same cell, but different environments. And guess what? Every cell operated differently. So that was kind of the birth of epigenetics, which is the environment is really what turns on and off our genes. So we can't use it's in my genes. Oh, everybody in my family. Oh, it's just my genetics. That's a very disempowered view. There's plenty of people that have risk for, they have the cancer gene, they have the osteoporosis gene, or, whatever it is, and they don't get it.
Yeah.
Right. So, autoimmune diseases, all of that. So like you and
Absolutely.
I have. So we, and the other thing, so clearly our environment, but specifically in Bruce Lipton's work, he said the thoughts that we think every day, it's something like we have 60,000 thoughts a day. 90% of them are the same from yesterday. And 90% of those are negative. Unless we take conscious behavior, conscious intention to change our thoughts, right? Evolutionarily, it was very important for us to pay attention to negative things, because negative things could risk our life. That's a problem. I got to fix that. Unfortunately, the brain hasn't evolved as fast as society has, because we don't need to hyper focus on everything that's negative in our life. It actually is done a 180 now. Focusing on what's a negative in our life is actually now making us more depressed, making us more sick, making us, not as productive. So when we intentionally catch our negative train, our negative thoughts, and say, hold on, I could talk a whole hour on this, right? So many of us have been programmed with false beliefs from childhood. Oh, I'm not enough, right? That's the most common one worldwide. I'm not enough. I'm not fit enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever enough, right?
Yeah.
So being conscious, finding out a daily practice of not falling into the knee-jerk negative thoughts. They're knee-jerk negative thoughts unless you consciously choose a different path.
Yeah. Okay.
So powerful. It's so powerful. So as simple as a 3-minute gratitude practice every night. I'm going to write down 5 things I'm grateful for, 5 things I'm proud of myself for. You can do it with your family at dinner. What are 5 things, right? Bringing that gratitude practice. This was a study I read in med school that said daily gratitude practice for 6 weeks is a fair treatment for mild to moderate depression.
Wow. Interesting.
Yes. Gratitude practice. It is medicine.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, what's fascinating about it is you hear so often, like you said, people say, well, it's my genetics. And they say it as they put it out there as if, well, there's nothing that I can do about it, right? Like that's almost what's implied. What's interesting about it is you could almost say, yes, it's your genetics, but it's how you're controlling your genetics. It's how you're influencing your genetics. Because very well, I'm sure I've experienced, I think almost everybody's experienced. If you are sitting in a circle with people and they have just a bunch of, negative commentary, negative energy about them, like you can feel that. And so if that's your environment, if those are the people that you are around, whether that's your family or anything like that, well, then most people end up just kind of falling right in line to be like that. And like you're saying, well, if that's then influencing the expression of our genetics, it's like, okay, yeah, you can say like, okay, yeah, this is because of my family, but not in the way that you think, not in the way that you don't have any control over, but in the way that almost you are voluntarily subjecting yourself to by choosing to be in that environment. So that's a really interesting aspect of this that I think goes unnoticed by so many people when they just want to give up responsibility and say, well, it's just my genetics.
Yes. And they say, speaking of people you surround yourself by, they say, I don't even know who they is. I've just heard this phrase so many times, that they say you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah. I love that because I've heard that before as well. On the one hand, you can look at like, okay, well, again, these are the people I hang out with. On the other hand, you can look at it and be like, whoa, I can find different people to hang out with and I can choose my circle. And then that, not only influences so many aspects of your life, but as you're saying, it influences your health. That's huge.
Absolutely. Yes. And, one of those 5 people can be God. One of those 5 people can be the podcast you listen to every day, your podcast, so it doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, I have to go, find new people.
Yeah.
It can be the energy you surround yourself around the most,
Sure. Absolutely.
Your exercise partner or, whatever, but it can be like a God or a podcast or a book, an author,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we could even take it to the accounts that you follow on social media. If you are just following gossip all the time, then that's the stuff that you're going to see, right?
That is one of the energies, we could say the 5 energies, if you will, to make it more broad.
Yeah.
With. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. That's a huge one. Mindset is super powerful. All right. Let's get to exercise. Cause obviously we talk about exercise a ton on this podcast. That's our specialty, but I want to hear your expertise on it.
Well, I kind of want to just say, duh.
I love it.
Next. It's the most powerful medicine out there. It's what our bodies need to function. It's like, there isn't an owner's manual for their body, but apparently there should be, because there's some basic rules that people, when they follow, will feel better.
Yes.
Right. If you put diesel in an unleaded car, it won't work.
Right.
If you don't move your body, now the body's incredibly resilient. It can take a lot of stress and damage. And people are like, oh, I just sleep 4 hours a day, I feel fine. Oh, I smoke all the time, I feel fine. I'm like, well, when is that going to catch up to you? Because that's not part of the owner's manual.
Yeah.
And part of the owner's manual is absolutely movement. All you have to do is think about how we evolved, running around in the wilderness.
Yep. Yeah.
And there was no desks and there was no chairs, So
absolutely.
It's just, and I do it frankly because there was a study that looked at people that kept their weight loss off, that went into exercise to lose weight. And the people that kept their weight loss off were the people that exercised because they knew that they would feel better that day. That they would go to the gym and they would immediately be like, I feel better that day. The people that didn't keep it off were the ones that, this better work, man, because I'm sick of being fat. This better work. And they just doing it for some future, they weren't in touch with right now. I feel like $1 million. I'm not focused on how much weight I'm losing. I'm focused on, I literally just came from yoga class and
awesome.
Amazing. I'm open and I love my exercise.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. And to combine these first 2 points, because like I said, our listeners are very well accustomed to the importance of exercise for health. But when it comes to mindset and how that can influence exercise, I heard of a study one time where the researchers looked at the cleaning staff, the house staff of a big hotel. Okay. And half of them, they told them, well, your work is exercise. And the other half, they just let them go on their way. And over the course of, I don't know how long it was, 3 months, 6 months, something like that. The half that they just told that, hey, what you're doing is exercise, like moving all day. Yeah. They lost more weight. Their blood pressure reduced. They saw all the positive benefits that we associate with exercise by doing the exact same job that they've been doing all along and the exact same to the other, but it was their mindset.
Is such a cool study.
Isn't it? Yeah.
That is such a powerful, that's exactly it. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
I love it. I love it. All right. So let's get to D, diet. Talk to me about diet, because, you know, there are so many like opinions around diet and it gets so politicized at times, at least within the, you know, the health world. But like, what's your take on diet, and how do we actually just make it simple for ourselves?
So simple. It's
Yeah.
so simple. Eat food that nature grows.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
And make sure it's a clean source. You know, I'm not a fan of any conventional meats at all. Not to mention that, you know, going vegetarian is the most powerful thing you can do for reducing, you know, climate change, more so than any other step you can take. But, you know, the way they feed and what they shoot into animals today is horrific. So I certainly don't want to put that energy or chemical, you know, in my body. But, you know, eat food that nature made. Chia seed pudding for breakfast, free range scrambled eggs for breakfast, a nice fruit smoothie for breakfast. You know, I'm not 100% non-processed. Obviously, I've got protein powder and I've got gluten-free bread and, you know, whatever. But, you know, get rid of all the sugar for breakfast for sure. I gave a TED talk called "Sugar is Not a Treat," and
I watched that. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's going to hit 3 million views. My guess is like in June.
Congratulations. So, that is so cool.
Yeah, sugar is not a treat. And I say in it, if we just start our day without a mocha, without Fruit Loops, without a bagel, you know, and do like a protein, the whole world would be happier and more productive. I'm pretty sure.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Like you're saying, it just doesn't have to be that difficult. I think so often we get caught up in the numbers. We get caught up on the calories and the macro breakdown. And, you know, we're hearing all this stuff. It's like, okay, just stop all that for a second. If you're feeling confused, if you're feeling overwhelmed, just start with what nature made. And then we can tweak and refine from there if you want to, but just that's going to be 80% of the battle right there.
Yeah, you could have blueberries and yogurt. I mean, I know yogurt is a sensitive process thing. Blueberries and yogurt, there's one breakfast. Chia seed pudding, if you don't know how to make it, Google it. It's brilliant. Scrambled eggs, hopefully, you know, free range. So then maybe a fruit smoothie. And yeah, you're going to have to maybe put some, you know, whatever protein powder or stuff in there. But there's 4 breakfasts right there, right? Perfect. Eggs, smoothie, yogurt, and whatever else I said.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Super simple, very applicable. All right, let's talk about sleep. How does sleep fit into this, especially with everything that's going on, the accessibility of screens, blue light, you know, just pressures in life? Where does sleep actually fit in?
Well, sleep is the most important time to regenerate your body. Your body is busy during the day. It's encountering a lot of stress, a lot of inflammation. I mean, the body is always have some level of inflammation. Inflammation simply means cellular breakdown. That's all it means. When you know, hurt your knee and then it's swollen and it's inflamed, that's because there's massive cellular breakdown going on. But guess what? There's cellular breakdown right now. I'm now, you know, our body is a constant organic animal. Cells are growing and functioning, digesting, thinking, walking, going to the bathroom, burping, talking. And by the end of the day, you're tired because the cells are like, whew, did a lot today. Right. So when we go to bed, then that is like plugging in our phone. You've got to recharge the battery. Like if you don't recharge the battery, it won't work. But again, the fortunate or unfortunate thing about the body is the resilience, you know, oh, I only didn't sleep a few hours, you know? And so that's why I don't ever think that anybody should have on a regular basis less than 6 or 7 hours a night. It's just not goes against the science. I don't care how great you feel. You're not fully charging your battery. You're not putting the, you know, the phone down and letting it plug in and recharge. So the cells, you're very busy when you sleep. You're very busy rebuilding all the cellular damage. It's not damage in a bad way. It's no more damage than when you work out really hard at the gym and then you're sore and you have to recover, right? And you actually recover stronger. So sleep is recovery. And this is an incredible machine. I mean, this is an unbelievable machine, what it does for us. And there's trillions of cells. And it's so complex that it needs a third of the 24 hours to regenerate.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, that should tell you, you got to do it. You just need to regenerate. It decreases cancer. You can die. I mean, they've kept rats awake for I don't know how many days. And after so many days of being awake, they die. Because the cells don't get the rejuvenation that they need, and then you die. So sleep is all about the regen, and it keeps you younger, of course, because you have more time to regenerate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love it. You know, one thing I've heard is that at least in the US, the number one day for the most reported heart attacks is the day when the clocks spring forward. Or that Monday, right? So when we all go back, like the Sunday, everybody sleeps in, but that Monday when you actually lose that first hour of sleep.
That is true.
That's what I've heard. That's crazy, isn't it? Just reduction of 1 hour.
Yes.
Yeah. That's nuts. That's nuts. Yeah. So, okay. So we have mindset, we have exercise, we have diet, we have sleep. Each of these is so incredibly important. And yet each of them is so simple. Like we make them out to be way more complex than they need to be. Yeah. How do you recommend somebody kind of starting in with this? Because I think a lot of times when we think about like, okay, living a healthy lifestyle, like we can have this 4-letter acronym and be like, all right, yeah, that seems really simple, but do I need to spend 30 minutes meditating, an hour exercising, and, you know, get my 8 hours of sleep, but not eat 3 hours before, you know, everything like that. And all of a sudden it's like, well, when do I live a life? So how do you recommend people actually implementing this?
Yeah, well, so I work privately with patients with type 1 diabetes, and I've worked privately, virtually with them for 10 years. And I'm a holistic physician, which means I'm always looking at the whole person. I'm looking at their blood sugar levels and all their meds, literally, and my acronym, right? So as a physician, I'm so excited about helping people with all of these things because they're so vital. I mean, it's a disservice to any patient if you go to a doctor and they don't ask you about these 4 things. No matter what doctor you go to, if they don't ask you about these 4 things, they are missing the most important aspect of your health, right? And so this is an excellent question because we need a lot of help of how to incorporate them. So when I work privately with my type 1s, I will always say, which are you drawn to do first? So which are you like, I really want to do that? Okay? So you just get the wheel rolling, right?
Yeah.
If you think exercise sounds like the most horrible thing in the world and you hate it and you never want to do it, but you know that your breakfast sucks and you've been having that dumb pastry with the mocha and you've been in the back of your head going, you know, why don't I just do like an egg breakfast or something, right? So go for the first easiest one.
Yeah.
And do baby steps, absolutely do baby steps. In January of this year, so I have been trying to do a daily meditation practice for maybe 10 or 20 years. And I've never thought I'd done it good enough. And then in January, there was a guy that was like, here's what you do. You write on a sticky note before you go to bed, 5 minutes with an empty checkbox to it, 5 minutes meditation, and then 5 minutes journal. And he puts a sticky note on his bedstand every morning or every night. He wakes up and then he sees it and he literally closes his eyes for 5 minutes. And then he journals for 5 minutes. And I'm like, so I did that every day in January. And I was like, that is brilliant. And I still haven't like kept it up, but I still like, I meditated this morning. It's just kind of, you know, I don't, for some reason I have this idea that I'm supposed to do it at the exact same time and the exact same time.
Oh, sure. I got you.
Yeah. You know, and I'm like, you know, I do it here. I do it there. I got up early, went to yoga this morning, you know, but anyways, do it small. Do it, start with the easiest. You got to get the momentum going. So reach out to the one that feels easiest and then take us, if it's, you know, 5 minutes, whatever. And don't be like me where you're like constantly judging yourself that what you're doing isn't good enough.
Well, that's such a huge part of it as well, because I mean, we're talking about mindset, like you got all the talking stuff around you, but the person you actually spend the most time with is yourself. So don't be bringing yourself down, you know, when you're trying to build yourself up.
Okay, so I'm so honored right now. I am working with 2 teenage girls that have type 1, a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Oh,
And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're talking about self-love. And we're talking about, insecurity. Like one of them last week, I said, hey, do you want to talk your blood sugars today? Or do you want to talk about emotional stuff? And she goes, I want to talk about emotional stuff because it's summer and people wear little skimpy things in the summer and I'm really insecure about that. And I was just like, So I was teaching her all about self-love. And for many years, people have said to me, Jody, you need to love yourself more. You need to love yourself more. And I'm like, I go to yoga, I eat vegetables, I go to sleep. Like, I don't know what you mean. And what they meant was my internal dialogue is harsh. My internal do I think, Jody, you are doing so good. Wow, I am so proud of you. You've got your stuff together. Like, wow, you did a great day. How do you talk to yourself? How do you talk to yourself? Right. And my favorite phrase is, there's nobody in the world that's more important to love you than you.
Yes.
Nobody's going to love you more. I mean, maybe more other people love you more right now than you do, but make it a goal that nobody loves you more in the world than you do.
I love that. Yeah.
That's so powerful.
That's a tremendously powerful thought, because not to get down a whole new rabbit hole, but it's like we expect love from everybody else to a certain extent. How often do we stop and actually say, that's something that I'm going to do for myself?
Yes, it's a great practice. And I call it a practice, just like the practice of medicine, right? The practice of yoga.
Yeah.
You don't ever finish.
Right.
The practice of loving yourself. Right.
Yeah.
When I got that concept of like, nobody have the goal that you love yourself more than anybody. I'm like, that is healthy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And it's not an arrogance thing. It's not it's just like, me for me kind of thing.
And the important thing to bring into that, because my little perfectionist brain goes into perfection, is compassion for being human. Compassion for being procrastinating, compassion for, I shouldn't have said that. Compassion for like, I'm bummed that I did that. Compassion, right? There's no being human is messy. It's messy.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
So compassion for the imperfection of your life is so important. I practice that every day. Some days I'm very compassionate to myself, and other days I'm very upset with myself. And then I just have to, I'm like a professional athlete. I lost the game. Tomorrow I'll play better.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right. That's the mindset you have to have is, it's not going to be perfect, but you're going to keep trying and figuring out. And like you're saying, you can keep practicing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's like the perfect umbrella to go over all the meds.
Yeah.
It's just a practice. Have compassion. You're not going to get it perfect. There's no perfect, right? But making sure you have some sort of meds in place is going to make you be a happier, healthier person.
I love it. Right on. Well, Dr. Jody, thank you so much. How can people find out more about you? How can they connect with you and learn about how to work with you?
Well, like I said, I actually just work with type 1s.
Sure, yes.
But you can be newly diagnosed. You can have it for 50 years. Your kid can have it, anything like that. But I do encourage everybody to check out my TED Talk for sure.
Yes, okay.
All you have to do to find all my stuff in Google is just put the words Dr. Jody and the word diabetes. If you go Dr. Jody Diabetes, my website comes up, my TED Talk comes up, Facebook, all that stuff. So my website is drjodyn.com. But so many people get the letters wrong. So I always just say, just Google Dr. Jody Diabetes.
It works. Takes us all to the same place. We'll make sure to put all that in the show notes. Dr. Jody, thank you so much. This was just absolutely fantastic. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you for having me on, Charlie. Much gratitude to you.
Likewise. Wow, was that awesome or what? I mean, the idea of taking your meds is such a simple idea that applies to all of us, mindfulness, exercise, diet, sleep, like every single one of those variables is so important to each and every one of us. And we're talking about surefire ways to improve our health and function. We need to look no further than those 4 things right there. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is overwhelmed by the idea of trying to improve their health? They're not sure, okay, well, should I do this diet or, this eating technique or, how many times a week should I exercise? Everything like that. Like it just feels all too much for them. Share this episode with them so they can learn about this very straightforward approach to doing these 4 simple things to boost their health. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So what'd you think about that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed during today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, then you are going to love what I'm going to be presenting during my new training, How to Rebuild Your Aching Body in as little as 6 weeks without changing your lifestyle. It's happening this week, and you can get registered for free by going to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. But space is limited, so you need to head there now. secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com, and I can't wait to see you there. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.